fresh elections which was sought is the election in which I participated in and won. Now, the point is, in terms of Jimmy's position, after that, if then Justice Irene Muliakonja's ruling of September, delivered on September 7th, 2020, has not been overridden, where does Jim McKenna get the powers and authorities to lead the party or to call for the party conference? No, he doesn't, and he doesn't have. The only power that he held since then was his dubious relationship with the state. Where does Dennis Enap get the power to present himself as president? The same, because Dennis is the child of Akena in that group. You know, Dennis is a lawyer, is a fantastic young guy, genuinely knowing the position, the legal position of Akena. He decided last year when Jimmy decided that he wanted to sort of legitimize his illegality, called for another delegates conference. Dennis willingly participated in that, but I think strategically, because immediately he was recognized as a candidate. He went to court and sought to challenge Jimmy's position.
A few months ago, we had very vital conversations about what was going on in the Uganda People's Congress, the oldest political party in Uganda. We were analyzing why they did not front a presidential candidate. The internal squabbles that were happening in the party had led to a situation where it was not possible to have a presidential candidate as a result of the court battle. One of the people who were involved within the court process recently allied with the Patriotic League of Uganda, which is leaning to the first son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who has a very powerful footprint on Ugandan politics at the moment. And they declared that they would like to partner in order to create some form of order in the UPC. We've realized that that has led to back and forth tweets with the wife of the current president, at least at the Uganda House of the UPC, that is Jimmy Akena, who was also dropped as minister, and they were threatening to sort of investigate the property she has and that kind of thing. So as SEPA, we want to sort of build up on that conversation because we had a conversation with Joseph Ochieno, who had provided a lot of context. One, because he was a part of that very court process. Two, he holds legitimacy within this very conversation. But also three, he holds a historical record of analysis that he's able to bring to this conversation. Joseph Ochieno currently is out of the country, but is contributing to the conversations we are having here at the Center for Policy Analysis. Joseph, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. And you're fantastically smart. I'm delighted to be hosted by you.
Thank you so much. So the young people of this country, we are the majority of the country, and we just wanted to know, just give us a bit of context about what is happening in the UPC party, that even before we can just get into whether what is happening is right or wrong. The young people of this country would like to know. We are the majority of the people who watch these podcasts, who listen to this information. Just give us a bit of context about that.
So you're really telling me that the young people of Uganda are the net victims of 40 years of NRA, yeah? But look, I can go straight into that. And I think the first one is to clearly dismiss your narrative that Jim McKenna is president, because he's not. And then, of course, in the media, in which is part of my other trade, I would advise that next time you talk about Jim McKenna, you should say, one of the presumptive or an alleged, because it's an imposition. Yesterday, I was talking to a young member of the party who participated in one of Jim McKenna's recent activities, including that alleged online delegates conference, until he got to realize that he was basically entrenching and in illegality. So he looked for me until he found me. And in the course of the long conversation, he was privileged to hear from me that in 1996, Dr. Bote sacked Cecilia Gwal, who was then the head of the party's Presidential Police Commission, based at Uganda House in Kampala, when political parties were still banned. And the primary reason Dr. Bote sacked Cecilia Gwal was because she had gone against the party constitution, and she'd gone against the directive of the president. At the time, the only two legal and legitimate organs of the party was the presidency held by Dr. Milton Obote in Zambia, in Lusaka, and the party constitution, which NRA could not change. That was a dilemma for us as a party, because NRA had banned political parties in 1986 when they came, and in 1995 specifically, they entrenched in their constitution the ban where they say political parties were free to continue to exist at their party headquarters, as we did indeed in Uganda House, except that we're not allowed to open branch offices, we're not allowed to operate existing ones, we're not allowed to hold party rallies or campaign for candidates or indeed field candidates in any elections, in which therefore we're unable to go ahead and go through the process where we would then go ahead and elect our leader.
That was a movement system.
So as of 1995, 96, sorry?
That was a movement system.
Yes. Don't give it credit as a movement system. It's basically a dictatorship, because it's only in Uganda where that came, and I want to insist on that, particularly for young Ugandans. You know, it's never existed anywhere, and it's basically one of the ways in which NRA continued. But anyway, the specifics is this: that when it came to the elections after the presidential elections, which was a sham in which Semogere stood with Yoweri Museveni, the issue was whether or not political parties could then go ahead and formally field candidates. Cecilia opted to stand as a member of parliament, and the president gave a directive that any member of the party who was free to stand for elections in any position was free to do so, except because parties had been banned, any such member, if they were appointed leaders of the party, or if they had been elected members of the party, in which case maybe members formally of the Delegates Conference, or Joseph Ochieno, who was head of the External Bureau in UK at the time, or Cecilia Gwal, who was chairman of the Presidential Police Commission, an appointee. For me, I was elected in London for High was an appointee of the president, or a member of the Secretariat staff, meaning an employee. Suppose you, Joseph, were maybe the head of communications at Uganda House. What was required that was you first resign your position and so go there as an individual, in which case you don't push in the party. Cecilia insisted on standing for parliament while remaining chairman of the Presidential Police Commission. At that stage, the president sacked her. The reason why I was drawing this yesterday and the relevance is, I told this young person yesterday that in sacking Cecilia Gwal, Milton Obote was upholding the constitutional authority of Uganda People's Congress, our constitution, and his office as president. Milton Obote sacked Cecilia for a sin far less than the sin Jim McKenna and Beta Mongi have committed against the party in the last 10 years. That sort of is the context. So where do we find ourselves today? After the election of Olaro Tunu, who's now the big man on the table on the question of UN leadership in 2010, as Olaro was retired.
I must give you guys. I must give you guys credit. You guys have produced some gentlemen. The party has produced some very good gentlemen and ladies. Cecilia Gwal, now Olaro Otono, some good statesmen and women.
We produce some, or we are the only ones who produce real national leaders and global leaders.
Pure Republicans. You have their flowers. No, we can continue. Yes. We can continue with the argument.
Indeed, yeah. So what happens is that the election process which Olara Otuno started went on to become incomplete because for some of the reasons where people were accused Olara Otuno of seeking to block certain candidates, Jim McCain, in short, basically called a consultative meeting, which he turned into a delegates conference allegedly, and pronounced himself president. One, and number two, he organized a group of mobs to go ahead and occupy Uganda House and chase away Olara Otuno. This is now the common known thing. So in doing two things, Jim effectively overthrew both the party constitution and then the existing legitimate leadership of the party. It does not matter your opinion about Olara at the time or the leadership of Uganda House, but it was against the constitution of Uganda People's Congress. So that's what Jimmy did, and that is how he entered Uganda House. The next thing that happened, and I know it may be a bit boring for you, but I think it's important.
No, I think that the context is good.
Party members went to court, and this was led by then the Professor Kakonge, went to court to challenge Jimmy's actions. And whoever was advising Jimmy then ought to know that, well, the other side was bound to take legal action. And the UPC has lawyers, fantastic lawyers and fantastic brains from both sides anyway. So as it happens, the courts ruled against Jimmy. So when the courts ruled against him, he sought an appeal, which appeal now held on until 2020. It held on until 2020 because of Jimmy's official dubious relationship with NRA. So NRA protected Jimmy through the courts between 2015-16 and 2020. In 2020, through pressure, including my own opinion piece in the Sunday Monitor, a famous article that I wrote on Sunday, taunting the judiciary and linking them with the state and holding them responsible for holding UPC hostage. My piece ran on a Sunday, and on a Monday, maybe through the panic in the judiciary, the matter was listed for hearing on Wednesday. In short, the courts on Wednesday instructed that Jimmy's then pending delegate conference of Saturday should not proceed. That's on the record, from Court of Appeal. 4 weeks later, the court dismissed Jimmy's application, basically effectively saying Jimmy is not president.
You're not president.
For fresh elections. Now, yes. And so the fresh elections which was sought is the election in which I participated in and won. Now, the point is, in terms of Jimmy's position, after that, if then Justice Irene Muliakonja's ruling of September, delivered on September 7th, 2020, has not been overridden, where does Jim McKenna get the powers and authorities to lead the party or to call for the party conference? No, he doesn't, and he doesn't have. The only power that he held since then was his dubious relationship with the state. Where does Dennis Enap get the power to present himself as president? The same, because Dennis is the child of Akena in that group. Dennis is a lawyer, he's a fantastic young guy, genuinely knowing the position, the legal position of Akena. He decided last year when Jimmy decided that he wanted to sort of legitimize his illegality, called for another delegates conference. Dennis willingly participated in that, but I think strategically, because immediately he was recognized as a candidate. He went to court and sought to challenge Jimmy's position. So basically, both Dennis and Jimmy are illegitimate leaders of the party. And so that is that side of it. Now, on the other side, in terms of what happened in 2020, the elections that was conducted by Peter Walubiri, which Peter Walubiri got his authority from Joseph Bosa, who was the vice president to Olara, on the basis of the Court of Appeal ruling, whether you like Bosa or Walubiri, it basically follows that Walubiri had the legitimacy to organize those elections. And as you rightly, grantly, and fairly, and generously give me authority in the party, Ochieno cannot participate in anything political in Uganda or anything to do with UPC unless I'm very clear about it. So it's very clear that legally and politically and constitutionally, the legal authority to organize elections was Peter Walubiri. I participated in those elections, won those elections. Unfortunately, a section of the people in Walubiri's team, led by Isho Tomo Mino, who's now allegedly Enab's Secretary General. I know this is a bit boring for you guys.
No, no, it
made
isn't,
sure that
and
they
we
fudged
just
the figures.
because I think this is very important context, because the one who is
Yes,
seeking to say that they're allying with PLU did not even win the election. They were number what?
that's right.
Yeah, and because that's very important, because we can't have the other conversation without finishing this very one. You said he was number two
Indeed,
to
so I'll
you.
come to that. You're right. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'll come to that. Yes.
Okay, okay.
So then that happens. They find the figures, but they didn't know that I had a very organized system across the country with evidence, and my numbers. And number one. Number two, they didn't believe that Ochieno would ever come out publicly for the first time to criticize UPC or anything associated with UPC. And then number three, they didn't believe or think that I would stick to it and hang on it, because there was a nonsensical thought that Ochieno would hang around Kampala for 4 or 5 weeks, get broke, walk down the streets like some of the bandits throwing grenades in Kampala, get broke and get hungry, and then retire to Nagongere or somewhere in the streets beyond Kampala. That, of course, didn't happen. I did so deliberately because I want to stop impunity in UPC as much as I've been fighting against impunity in Uganda in the last 40 years. So what I did was to insist that the due process is followed. Extremely sad that certain key national leaders put aside enough, put aside Jim McKenna, put aside Betty Amongi, put aside a group of dubious hangers-on whose job it is to eat money, UPC money and public money on the blood of our people. But there's certain individual leaders in UPC, and I'm addressing them. National leaders, some people who had been ministers. National leaders, people who, if Obote came today, would be shocked that they could see their party being broken by a group of dubious money and dress-driven individuals, and they keep quiet. Some of those individuals were complicit in making sure that the due process following Justice Arian Muliagonje's ruling was not brought to fruition for whatever reason. So I decided to go to court at that stage. And because I was very confident that a judicial process, a judicial review, would establish the facts on the basis of my case, I went to court, and I'm afraid, because the evidence is so clear, because I've got sufficient witnesses and witness statements in court, there is no way in which any sensible average judge would rule otherwise. One,
would rule otherwise,
the declaration that Joseph Ochieno won those elections. And number two, I sought as a secondary prayer in the judicial review that Jim McKenna, who has been occupying Uganda House illegally, a permanent injunction be issued against him. The courts could not do that in the last 5 years because Jim McKenna and Beta Mongi were busy dancing with the NRA dictatorship. Now, what happened come PLU, which is basically your question?
Absolutely.
I think after Oyamba election.
Yes. Enter the 2026 election.
Yes. So until about Oyamba elections, Jim McKenna and certain individuals in the party didn't believe what we've been saying, that this is the party of the future. Very important. The individuals in UPC who, for some reason, had been bitten by Stockholm syndrome, and they are now prepared to say yes to NRA. So for me, I've been very clear and very convinced that this party's position is such that we are the future. And so we were not believed. So after a Yamba election in which some people got surprised and Jimmy suddenly realized, yes, we can get something out of it. Then you go to Dokolo by-election, and then again we win. At that stage, I think Jimmy and Betty, and I don't want to make speculations, I think thought that, now I think this deal, instead of doing the deal as the extreme junior begging partners with Mr. Museveni, we can do it as average king and queen of Lango, So basically, we need to retain this thing for our continued checks. So Jimmy decided that, okay, he can stand for president, hence beginning to further seek to revise the party constitution. Now, while that happened, it brought a division between Jimmy's position and NRA's position on the one hand. And then Betty, for her also strategic reasons, decides that she wants to move almost like, I don't want to use strong words, this business where you move from one place to another. And,
yes, I
so
saw
she
with the Honorable Cheng. They
yeah.
yeah,
So
their
it has moved
constituencies
as a
changed
member of parliament.
miraculously. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So she moved as a member of parliament from Apache to Gandhi's Lodge Oto in Oyam North. Yeah.
Wait, I thought
She
Lira.
moves now from Oyam North. Yes. She moves from Oyam North, now wants to move to Lira. And so she sought that. And going to Lira now wants to go and play around with Mr. Museveni's good girl, So
Good.
we end up in a situation in which Jimmy is causing particular disorganization and Betty is causing particular disorganization. And it's at that stage when the relationship of disco dancing, sort of drops, not collapses, but drops. At that stage, Dennis Enap, who concedes that once in a while he was the transport manager for goodies between State House and Akena, possibly realizes that, well, not only am I a young little boy anymore, but I will have a tiny little corral. I can
do something with this. Yes.
Yes.
I should not let a good crisis die.
NRA being what they are, NRA being what they are, they said yes.
This thing can work for us.
We can, yes, you can do whatever you go to do. Now, where does PLU come? PLU comes in because ENAP can disorganize for them, Jimmy. But the irony is that Jimmy is daddy's boy, meaning Mr. Museveni's boy, and ENAP decides to be young man's boy in the PLU,
because we need to examine that slightly closely. You say that Jimmy, even with his shortcomings, is still in the good books of Mr. Museveni. Just expound that. The president sometimes handles matters in that way. He may disagree with you, but you might still be in his good graces.
No, there is no evidence that Akena has withdrawn his dubious links with Mr. Museveni. If he has, Jimmy needs to come out and state the facts, because I know some of the facts, unfortunately for them. Come out and state to leaders and members of UPC and Ugandan citizens because we are the Congress of the people. Ugandan citizens because there are many Ugandans who died and have died and continue to suffer because of this party. And for Ugandans, because those are the people who should and must regain our confidence to become our voters as we rebuild this party and country going forward. So it's absolutely the responsibility of Jim Akena to explain to the people of Uganda what deal he has had with Mr. Museveni since 2015, but definitely since that distant event when he was able to host Mr. Museveni to a special chicken liver deal at Kamdini, rather at Minakulu, when Mr. Museveni was the chief guest at the wedding of the marriage for Jimmy and Beda Moment. Now, I don't take this personally. It's absolutely fine. All I'm saying is that just be honest, just be open. By the way, even as we are discussing reconciliation, say, maybe I did it because I wanted, to calm down so that for us to reconcile. But don't pretend. Don't pretend.
You're saying that on his own wedding, the president was the chief guest as a way of cementing the relationship.
No, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying Mr. Museveni was the chief guest, so therefore they've got a relationship. So Jim Akena can't pretend about the relationship with Mr. Museveni, So he needs to explain that. But number two, I also follow that when Museveni was the chief guest there, Jimmy is on the record as trying to explain away that he was not the reason, he did not do it, Amongi did not do it, but Speaker Kadaga did it. So Jim Akena and Beta Mongi are telling UPC members, that they're so, what I'm saying, that in their household, of all people, Rebecca Kadaga of Busoga Gods, a fantastic sister of mine, is the one who instructs who should be the chief guest in a traditional marriage which is means that the official table, the official high table is Obote's high table. And if it's not Milton Obote, it should really be a cultural leader from Lango. And if not, it should be a leader recognized by the family
by
as
the
the chief
UPC.
guest for that marriage. Go to that.
Yeah, because
And so that is the thing. But finally,
I get you.
Finally, you're asking me whether or not the relationship is still there. You know, I have been. I have worked in local government, so I've managed the housing and I manage relationships. That's why when I tell you about what a squatter is, I know the legal meaning. And when I talk about unauthorized occupants, I know the meaning in law and in practice. But also I know about relationship breakdowns. So I know what divorce is. I also know what domestic violence is. But so here, sometimes relationship breakdown means that, things are neither here nor there. They can come back. But recently, when Mr. Museveni appointed Santa Alum to his cabinet, because you are in the media, you must have read Jim McKenna's protest note, in which he said that in which he said that, look, how dare they not consult us first? Jimmy did not say it was devilish or sinful. See, how dare they not consult us? Don't they know that we are the custodians of who goes to eat? One.
I get you, which means in the past they were being consulted before they would make the appointments.
In a way, yes. But the most important point is that Jimmy goes on to say that, look, for them, they continue to have discussions with Mr. Museveni. So if you read the statement, and I'm really surprised that the media in Uganda didn't pick this, Jimmy said that they're having ongoing conversation with Mr. Museveni. So what it appears to be is that Jimmy and Dennis are continuing to outcompete one another on who is the best dancer to Comrade Museveni of Kabamba, Luwere Uganda Limited.
They are seeing who dances best, whose feet move faster, and who is able to bend slightly harder. Some dancing involves certain types of bending.
I'm a Catholic and I'm shy, as you know, so dancing sometimes becomes a difficult stuff for me.
It involves shaking and other things. I see. So your argument is that in the recent appointments where certain members could have benefited, there's a faction of UPC which was consulted and another was not. And the one which was consulted is the one now that has even allied with PLU. Are we effectively seeing like some form of coup within UPC itself, orchestrated by external factors? The president called Museveni, and he sometimes works from the outside to corrupt what looks like is existing. By the time you're to say you are reading your eyes, but who are you reading? You are reading yourself only, something like that. Is that something you see happening, or is it a whole different scenario?
No, I think I don't want you to misunderstand me. When you talk about factionalism, I'm not suggesting in any way, therefore, that simplistically Santa Loom belongs to necessarily a NAP faction. They may only share opinion and a cup of tea from Lango simply because both of them agree and NAP endorsed that with excitement. But I'm not necessarily sure that they're partners in this thing. And number two, between Jimmy and NAP, I don't want to say I call it factions, but quite clearly, as I said, I don't know at what stage, and it's up to NAP to say so, but these days, I think one of the things that a NAP group are saying is that because they went to court last year and they argue that Jimmy's term has expired because he served 2 terms, and for that reason, because the NAP stood and he got himself nominated, so then he was, and he's the only person who went through nomination, and so therefore he should be the legitimate president. I think on the basis of Justice Namara's ruling, if you look at it in a narrow way, NAP has an argument to make that Jimmy indeed, on the basis of the Namara ruling, that Jimmy indeed does not qualify, and so therefore should not be anywhere as part of the conversation. But from my perspective, from a UPC perspective, The ENAP process does not meet the threshold on two fronts. One is, as I said, even in the unlikely event that Jimmy was serving his former 2 terms and that Jimmy was legally bound to call for a delegates conference, ENAP would not qualify to be president unless and until he has been formally endorsed by the delegates conference of the party. And the delegates conference of the party is an organ, the supreme organ of the party, but it's the organ which can only be called by the president. And that's where Jimmy got the anomalies from. So if that has not happened, then you could see that itself is a limbo. But unfortunately, that in itself is a nullity and a void, because as I said, Jimmy does not qualify and did not qualify to call that delegates conference. And if you remember, I went to court and sought an interim injunction against Jimmy, which was successful, meaning on the current pending matters to be resolved, Jimmy continued with that alleged delegates conference of his illegally and illegitimately because the court had ruled against him. And so basically there's a matter of contempt of court still pending, together particularly with the matter of a permanent injunction.
Thank you, Joseph. And as we close, I just want us to be predictive, maybe just like in 2 minutes. What is this going to look like in the next 1, 2, 3 years? Was it something to simply scare off Honorable Ochieno from continuing his public challenges against the first son and the head of PLU himself? Do you see some legal challenges coming forth? Some, I don't know. Is he going to be chased the very same way he chased Orara Otunu from Uganda House? I just want to be predictive. Are you coming back to take on the party? I'm just trying to be predictive here as we close. What does the predictive modeling and analysis look like?
I am the nearest to the legal and constitutional president of the party, but I don't call myself president because, as I said, I don't want to set dubious precedents as if I came from the bush. So quite clearly that's the case.
People's president.
Yeah. Number 2, then you said, "Are you coming back?" No. By the way, I am out on private duties and family, but I'm also out continuing to do the important work that Milton Obote left me to do, and I'm also out with the huge and more important commitments, considering what's happening politically at home, to resolve that we have to continue working because we want to make sure that there's a Uganda for you and a post-7 Uganda which is harmonious, but one which operates in conformity with the international law. That said, as I said, the matter of the leadership of UPC does not lie with PLU and does not lie with Mr. Museveni. And that's another insulting element. The people who took UPC to NRA, and by the way, they took UPC, there is evidence that they took UPC to these agencies voluntarily. Although I also know that there's evidence that NRA has been infiltrated us as UPC for many years. As the head of the External Bureau, seated not far away from where I'm seated at the moment, we were infiltrated in exile by NRA, but that was to sink our capacity. But for Jimmy and Dennis, it would appear there is clear evidence that they voluntarily went to NRA for whatever it is. And I think that's inexcusable. Now, that said, the official position of the party is as continues to be held hostage by the judiciary. And I think in front of Lady Justice Joyce Kavuma's court, there's a written bit in which she talks about justice delayed, and there is a piece where she talks about justice denied. The fact that the matter that holds UPC leadership hostage has been in the hands of the judiciary now coming 5 years, 4.5 years definitely, and that Lady Justice Kavuma holds 4 files to resolve this matter, and that the last time we appeared in court on November 28th, I think, she assured us that she had everything else and she's waiting for a ruling. And that if these are people who went to law schools, some of the law schools that were equipped, and fully established by the Uganda People's Congress government and the cause of the people, and if these are leaders who go to church, and if these are leaders who go to mosques, and if these are leaders with a conscience, And if this is a judiciary who knows that their job it is to be the balancers between the executive and the legislature, and that on behalf of we, the first estate, the citizens, we depend on them. It's absolutely the responsibility of the judiciary to examine their conscience. As it happens, the new Chief Justice was a principal judge when I visited him, and I visited him informally. So they know this case. So the matter of the leadership of UPC lies in the hands of the judiciary, with all the evidence. The outcome of that will determine who the president of UPC is. And in the likely event that they do what they have been trying to avoid in the last 5 years, they will rule that Joseph Ochieno is the duly elected president of Uganda People's Congress. And when that happens, I'll seek to bring together everybody else in UPC who's willing to work hard for UPC so that we work for UPC's high table rather than seeking crumbs from anywhere else.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joseph. I think that context all the way from the 1980s till date and what the future looks like has been very, very, very helpful. To your viewer, we're trying to analyze what the current decision of the Dennis and a group in the UPC to ally with PLU means, and what the solutions are. How can we just get uncoupled from the history of a case being trapped in court for more than 6 years, a lot of things going wrong and one wrong thing piling up on another? How do we just get unstuck? And what's the role of due process? What's the role of the judiciary? Joseph Ochieno, it was our honor having you here on the Policy Digest podcast. I hope that the day in London goes well. Have a good day. Thank you for listening to the Policy Digest podcast, the Center for Policy Analysis podcast that is profiling African ideas and people that are shaping the future of their communities. Subscribe to all our platforms on YouTube and Podbean.